Simon Sinek says people don't buy products, they buy your why. What is your why? What is the impact that you want to create? What are the processes that you're defining? What are the systems that you structured, and how do they affect change where you work inside the workplace? And so I encourage all HR professionals to be dirty, right? And that sounds so crazy. I encourage them to be dirty. I encourage them to be divergent. Don't just be one thing, to be intentional, to be resilient, but use your recognition and reward system to drive those outcomes, right? So look at your talent and your optimization and be strategic. Don't just hire people because of what they can do, but hire them because of who they are. And always keep your why up front, because if you know your why, you'll always figure out your how.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of All About HR. My name is Nelly, and on today's episode, I speak with Khalilah K.O. Olokunola. She is the Chief People Officer at a company called TRU Colors. And TRU Colors was founded in 2018 by rival gang members from 3 different gangs. Together, Khalilah and I, we talked about the fascinating story behind TRU Colors. We also talked about their onboarding program called Disrupt You, and we talked about dirty HR, a concept Khalilah came up with. I think this one is a must watch. So without further ado, go check out our conversation. Before you do so, do subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video. Thank you and bye. Welcome to another episode of All About HR. Hi there, Khalilah. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Well, thank you for joining me. And before we really dive into our conversation, perhaps you can tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so KO, Khalilah Olokunola, Chief People Officer at TRU Colors. I entered the HR industry by accident. It wasn't a first choice of mine. I knew that I wanted to impact people. I just didn't think that it would be in this way. I've been at TRU Colors since the inception in 2017. And in addition to being here at TRU Colors, I am an advocate for second chance hires, DEI, and creating communities of belonging inside the workplace. I'm an author, also a speaker, and I am married to Al, and we have 4 kids and a pup named Miss Bailey.
Oh, nice. I love it. All right, so Khalilah, I think we can best probably start at the beginning, which is the story of TRU Colors. So perhaps you can talk us through the journey.
Yeah, so in 2015, a 16-year-old by the name of Shane Simpson was gunned down on Castle Street, which wasn't too far from Untapped, which is a company that our CEO and founder had at the time. He was appalled. He didn't know that we had gangs in Wilmington because he lives behind the gate in the country club. So he reached out to his friend Ben David, who is the district attorney, and he said, I want to meet whoever's top gangster in town, which is crazy, right? And so Ben David connected him to the gang task force, who connected him to 3 young men who they thought were influential in gangs, and that sparked the conversation. That was way back in December of 2015. It was a horrific crime that rocked our city. The violence wasn't just the 16-year-old that was killed, but he was gunned down by young men that were also his same age. And so that began to start that conversation in his journey of George Taylor, our CEO, having conversations with gang. And what he learned was powerful. He realized that the gangs weren't invested in the drug trade. They were looking for economic opportunity and inclusive opportunities also. And that began to spark the idea of TRU Colors, what it could potentially be.
That is a very powerful story indeed. And so basically what I think is interesting here as well is that the fact that they were, let's say, operating in gangs really came from this lack of other opportunities. Am I right?
Yeah, it came from a lack of economic opportunity and inclusivity. So in the inner city, there's a lack of resources. Most inner cities are food deserts, so they don't have access to fruits and vegetables like most people. Their pricing on milk, in the supermarket where I live, it's $2. In those neighborhoods, it's $6 and $7. And there's a lack of job opportunity because most of the people that live in those areas don't see themselves outside of where they grew up because of where they've been confined in the experiences that they had. And so the idea was to change, the product that they were using and make it legal, and to provide them education, see if they could adapt to that form of education, see if they would be willing to stop violence as we we saw it in the community and make a change. And it was remarkable what we begin to see happen even early on when TRU Colors started. George brought in 3 young men, those same 3 men he had the conversation with, and he put them in Untapped, which again was filled with white, educated millennials. And so we thought there would be this extreme culture divide. But after 24 hours, they were the most popular people inside the building. They were able to adapt in that environment. And so we thought that we just got lucky. And so we put out a call for anyone with status, leadership to come in. And once they came in, that began the start of seeing if what happened with those 3 young men could happen again. And it did. And when we realized that by providing education and opportunity, that not only would we be able to decrease violence, but we can change a community by changing an individual's life and what they believed about themselves, TRU Colors begin to move forward.
Wow. Where did then the idea come from, Khalilah, specifically for a brewery? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, great question. So Untapped is the largest beer app in the country. It was originally started as Next Glass by George Sun, and Untapped was acquired and it merged. And so because he already had built-in relationships in that space, and he was looking for an operation that we could open, that we would be able to hire at least 100 people, the idea of a brewery, came to mind. But then we also realized that everything is sparked by a conversation. It challenges what you believe about yourself, your situation, your circumstance. And so beer not only became the catalyst to help sustain the social mission, but also the catalyst to help spark a conversation.
Fantastic. That was actually pretty literally a double-edged sword there, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. And so, thinking about starting this brewery, and a lot of people ask that question, we realized we could hire people in different departments because we have marketing, finance, HR, health and wellness, sales, and also we have the brew house. And so we're able to hire, the goal is 125 people, gang here in the city. And we're hoping that what they learn, they can push down that positive peer pressure to their peers, and it would continue to provoke that change. And other organizations would see what we've done and try to shape a model on their own, like what we have here.
So basically, to really spread the formula that worked so well, spread it across the country.
That's right. I mean, a lot of organizations want to do social good. They want to make impact, but they don't know where to start, or they're not specifically tied to a mission. For us, it was something that was sparked by George when he saw this news story and heard this 911 call. Often purpose is predicated from pain and passion. And so that's what happened in him. And so when that happened, he went forward. And so there's other organizations that we can think of, like Ben & Jerry's or Patagonia, who have missions, or Interface, who realized, the carpets that they were creating, the glue was affecting the environment. So they made a change internally and they became more mission minded. And now one of the top sustainable businesses that we have in the country. And so we hope that the model shows people that they can be people focused, purpose driven, and also profit aligned.
Very powerful again, I think, Khalilah. Now, something I'm wondering about here is that, so I'm guessing here that these 3 men that he was talking to, that they probably came from 3 different gangs then. Am I right in assuming that?
Right. The idea for TRU Colors is that, we connect and bring together rival gangs to work together. And so they had to come in, they had to spark a conversation with each other and be willing to work together. And after it happened with that original 3, we became the original 11. And that 11 was a makeup of Bloods, Crips, and GDs, which is the 3 main gangs that we have here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And in the beginning, I mean, everybody wanted to talk the loudest because that's what they believed would convey their message. But what they learned is that even sitting at the table with people that they couldn't actually be on the same block with at any period of time, was that they had more in common with the young men across from them than they had that divided them. And we began to shape systems and processes that were intentional about unifying them and bringing them together. The idea of our Disrupt You program, which is our 8-week onboarding of life skills, social skills, business skills, and of course fear, was not only to teach skills, but also teach you to discover who you are, what could possibly be in your life, and also to unify you with the person across from you that you may have considered a rival for so long. And so we have conversations that was sparked from people who injured or killed somebody else's best friend. And that is really a tough conversation to hear, or a tough statement to hear. But imagine someone who took something so personal and so important from you, and you come into this building and you spark that conversation, and now you call each other's brothers. And that's some of the change that's happened here at TRU Colors. And internally, when you work with people, you can define and design based on what their needs are. And so intentionality for us here at TRU Colors is important. And having rivals from all walks of life, come together is vital for the social mission, because that's the only way that we decrease violence.
Yeah, I'd like to zoom in on that a little bit more actually here, Khalilah, because I was hoping to talk to you about Disrupt You just mentioned it. So yes, this is your onboarding progress, and it's meant to provide the foundation and education and also opportunities. It's really around, yeah, bringing these people together for this purpose that you mentioned. But maybe we can make it a little bit more practical for our listeners,
Yeah.
because I think some of the questions that they might have, I have it, I know, is that, okay, so how do you get these people, yeah, behind that same mission and work together, not maybe even not just as colleagues, but as you said, as brothers? How do you get there? What does that look like?
Well, the first reality, which I'm sure everyone knows, is that we have to offer economic opportunity. It's the pay, right? We're offering them a livable wage to take care of their bills. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is real, and so when we offer them a livable wage, they're willing to come in and to have that conversation. And so once they get in, though, we have to make sure that we keep the conversation going, and that starts by teaching them how to discover themselves. And so in that first part of Disrupt You, I like to call it the hard honeymoon phase, where you're getting to know a little bit about yourself. Like, what skills do you have? And, how do they translate from the block inside of this boardroom environment? How can you apply them in real life? And it's in that first week that I call Belief Week that it often shocks people. Imagine putting a group of individuals in a room, not only with people they don't get along with, but just with themselves, and they have to get to know who they are, and they can see a skill set that they've always had translated in a powerful and positive way. And so when we're able to do that, and this is an example, I had a young man who laughed at me and told me that all he had was being a smooth talker, which is funny, right? He was a smooth talker. And so for me, that means that he thought that he could communicate effectively. And so I used that talent that he believed he had, and I began to cultivate it from there. I partner each member up with an individual and make them accountability partners. And so you work together on projects and assignments while you're inside of Disrupt You early on. And so if you are a company and you're looking to bring in a base of people and you're wondering how to make a change in the beginning, don't only teach them what they need to do to apply in the workplace, but put them in a position where you can teach them how to discover what they already possess and how it applies to the company and the company's success. I had to make sure that each individual team member not only had a livable wage, not only discovered something about themselves, but they knew that there was meaning by them being here that could affect change, not only for the company's mission, but the company's bottom line.
I really like that example that you gave about the guy that said he was a smooth talker, and then
Yeah, he was a smooth talker, and I have other guys that I have a young man who just likes numbers. Today, he's our finance manager. And so because he always loved numbers, and so it's translating those street skills into the boardroom, and from different perspectives that matters. For a CEO, it means that this business is scalable, right? For HR, it means that professional development can be key for us in the workplace. I don't always have to hire a star performer. I can provide the right tools, and this individual can become the star performer. And for the investor, it just shows you that you don't always have to look for the round peg in the round hole, that you can look for someone with passion, and you can give them the tools they need to help grow them into the place that you need them to go. And so from different perspectives, what we did here in the beginning looks different, but the power in it is that they came in for the money, and what happened is they discovered themselves. And when they discovered themselves and the change that they could make, they began to stay because of the mission.
I think what I really love about this, Khalilah, is that it sounds like you start where their talents already lie, where their passion already lies. And I think if you start there where someone's passion lies and where their natural interest lies, then that is already probably halfway through the road to success, right? In the role that they're going to have in the company. And I think if we look at this from a broader perspective, this is what so many other organizations should do so much more of when they are actually hiring people for certain positions.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You know, we recruit a little bit different here. And so when we bring people in, we give them an open house in a group environment so everyone, again, can connect. And then we do a departmental call where you go into each conference room and you meet the team members in that department and the managers there. And after that experience, we ask you, what department do you think you'd be interested in and what skills do you believe you have? And so when someone is brought on in to disrupt you, we don't just teach them, you know, basic life skills, eye contact and communication, or teaching them how to do things like handle their finances, or providing tools to make sure that they have reliable transportation and stable housing. We're also teaching them the basics of those skills in those areas they said they was interested in so they can get a taste of what that feels like. And I think that if more companies, like you said, start there, they would realize that they have automatic buy-in to build up a team member because it's something that they already have and something that they already want. And so I think that, you know, in the coming time, even in 2022, that professional development is going to be key, but it's not going to be just what you need in the organization. It has to be what people need for themselves, because in this great resignation, or I like to call the great revelation, we've had these aha moments where members are putting more value on their values. They don't just care about the money, they care about mission. If we align our goals with our people, I think we'll not only find more impact, but we'll reduce turnover. It'll help our bottom line because we have team members that stay in the roles, not that we put them in, but that we prepared them for.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think one more thing before we move on to something else that I absolutely can't wait to talk to you about, Khalilah, is when we talk about this and the approach that you have at TRU Color, which I think is fantastic. If again we take a bit of a larger view, so there is in the US, I think there are 27 million so-called hidden workers, people that don't necessarily always tick all the right boxes on their resumes. So if we look at TRU Colors again, what would you say then that companies can learn from TRU Colors in this regard? In a few
Yeah,
words.
I think that we can learn that if we look again, we would find that if we invest in second chance hires, moms returning back into the workplace, populations that may not always be considered first choice because we're always looking for someone that has the right briefcase, the resume, the track record. But if we look at people that have the right heart case and head case, that means that they have the cognitive ability to do the job and they have the passion for the job, that we'll find team members that are loyal and dedicated. So I would tell organizations to look again, to look beyond the population they've always recruited for and look at the second chance hire market. Look at moms returning back into the workplace, or look at students transitioning from college into the workplace who have this extreme passion to make a difference, and begin to cultivate from there.
Okay, so the next topic here, Khalilah, that I'm super excited about is dirty HR. Now, this is a concept that you came up with, right?
Right.
So we're going to talk
I
about
did.
it. And I think the first question here for our listeners, for audience, would be perhaps you can start by telling us what dirty HR stands for.
Yeah, you know, when I say dirty HR, people cringe because HR is, you know, so compliant. Right? HR is about compliance. And so for us, you know, I think that we had to create a re-engineered approach. And dirty is not about breaking rules, but it's more about being hands on and shaping and creating the processes and systems for your team. I think when we spoke earlier, I talked about something called the KIND code, and KIND is another acronym for knowledge inspires new direction. If you define and design systems based on the people that you're serving, it'll be more impactful because you're designing specifically for that target. So dirty is also an acronym. That D is divergent, like you can't just fit in one place. HR can no longer just be one thing. Last year, we saw that we had to become medical professionals. We had to become conflict resolution specialists. We still had to recruit. We had to figure out how to make the hybrid workspace or the work from home workspace work. We had to become culture champions. We had to become all these things. And so that D is for divergent. And it also can be DEI, belonging. How can we be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive in our environment? That I is for intentionality. How can we be intentional in what we do and what we create and shape? Because intentionality helps build the most impact. And that R is resilient. Like HR has to have extreme bounce back. For us, when I look at my recognition and reward system, and this may sound funny, I use that to always bring the team back from their difficult challenges. So that R for me is resilient, but I use the recognition and reward system in order to do that and drive those outcomes that we actually need. And T is talent optimization, strategy, and assessment. And so I just don't look at what you can do. I look at who you are. For an example, my assessment tells me I'm a maverick. I'm a risk taker. I'll break the rules. I'm on the edge. And so if you have a team and everyone there is passive, you may need a maverick on your team to help facilitate a specific project. So begin to be more strategic when we hire through your talent optimization in that strategy. And that why is your impact and processes. Simon Sinek says people don't buy products, they buy your why. What is your why? What is the impact that you want to create? What are the processes that you're defining? What are the systems that you structured? And how do they affect change where you work inside the workplace? And so I encourage all HR professionals to be dirty, right? And that sounds so crazy. I encourage them to be dirty. I encourage them to be divergent. Don't just be one thing, to be intentional, to be resilient, but use your recognition and reward system to drive those outcomes, right? So look at your talent and your optimization and be strategic. Don't just hire people because of what they can do, but hire them because of who they are. And always keep your why up front, because if you know your why, you'll always figure out your how.
Wow, Khalilah, I'm pretty impressed by this. Now, how did you come up with this? Were you just looking at the HR space and you saw how things were being done, or you were thinking, okay, so yeah, this is way too compliant. This is not working for us. What's the story behind the THR?
Yeah, so I think I told you that I got into the HR industry by accident, and so I wouldn't have chosen on my own. And when I did get into the HR industry, there was a big learning curve I had to get over. A lot of compliance I had to learn, a lot of rules and regulations, and I realized that they didn't work for the people I was serving. They just didn't work for gang. They didn't work. The standard recruitment strategy didn't work for me to recruit gang. I couldn't just put an ad out. They weren't looking where we put ads. And so I had to go to the trap house, the courthouse, and the jailhouse to begin to recruit people. And then for non-gang members who we have, because we have a mixed workplace, I had to bring people in that were empathetic and that were willing to work in a different kind of inclusive environment, because they were working with active gang members. And for some people, they may think that that is not the safest place to work, even though it is probably the safest place to work. And so when I realized the best practices that was in place and the human resource industry didn't work for us, I began to re-engineer. And I designed this service blueprint. A service blueprint shows you the overall processes, and it shows you the customer journey. And so I looked at the customer journey like an employee journey, and how the policies and processes would intertwine with their journey from hire to retire. And I began to design from that place and used everything I did to continuously drive those outcomes. You have to think about this. We have this 5-month onboarding that includes that 8-week disrupt you, that 90-day internship of projects and stretch assignments. And then you go on your career track. But we can't just stop there. We have to continuously have these processes in place to make sure that it sustains the growth that our team encountered. Because when they leave here, they go back to their communities, they go back to their neighborhoods, and they go back to the gangs, because we require them to stay active. And so being dirty is my way of not just putting something in that's time stamped, but putting something in and then adding a sustainability process so that we can continue to hit the goals that we've hit and to continue to make the change that we've seen before, and that we know that we'll continue to see if we put these things in place and keep them in place.
I'm not sure if I can call it a textbook example, but I can call it, I think, a real life example of how you really tailored or engineered, as you call it, the HR at True Colors to the needs of your customers, the people working at True Colors. And I think once again, this is something that a lot of companies can learn a lot from.
I think that for us, the dynamic is, how do we bring game in from the block to the boardroom, and how do we bring people that just know the boardroom closer to the block to have that conversation and get to know each other? Our recognition and reward system, it's based on work performance, but we do a little bit more. In Disrupt You, we teach about money, housing, transportation, and healthy relationships, and we continue that. So a big part of our recognition and reward system is something called True Community. I have the team split into tribes, and each tribe elects a head coach, and they compete on a monthly basis based on work performance, based on giving back to the community, and based on some of the personal goals they hit for themselves. So that continues to drive those outcomes of unifying rivals because they have to work together. It continues to drive those outcomes of growth, not just professionally, but also personally. And it creates a team atmosphere, and you are rewarded. And because our team members are who they are, you won't get points, you get community cash. And if you have the most community cash in the quarter, you are the baller of the quarter, because that's the language of the people in our land. And so you get this big rope chain that says that you're the baller of the quarter. And that may sound awkward, but for companies listening, it is, you are shaping specifically for the people that you're serving. And so what does your company do? If you are a coffee maker, then your baller of the quarter may get a gold cup, whatever it is. And you're using these recognition and reward system to drive the outcomes you want to see in the workplace. We don't always have to crack a whip or create a rule. We can create a system and invite people to be a part of that space and watch them soar.
Wow. I love it. I love it. I had another one here, Khalilah, and it's like, so if you just said it as well, but if there's HR practitioners in our audience and they're thinking, okay, it's time for us to get dirty, how can they best get started?
So that's a great question. I get a lot of people that ask me, how can they get started? I think it's that kind code. I'll go back to that data, to surveying the land, to auditing and assessing, looking at what you do really good and looking at what you want to do better. And when you do that, you create an end goal. What do you want to see? I want to see unity. And so because I want to see unity and I want to see personal success in each individual team member, I take that goal and I begin to work backwards from there. And so if you are an HR practitioner and you're listening, I would audit and assess. I would create what your end goal is. What do you want to see in your team? Do you want to see an increase in diverse candidates? Do you want to see more camaraderie in the workplace? Do you want to see an increase in productivity? Do you want to see an increase in sales? Whatever that is, you get that why and you put it up front, and then you design everything backwards. How can you create a program where you're teaching people how to get better at making the sale? That comes with communication and conversation and connectivity. And so you're creating from the space of your why. And when you create from the space of your why, you'll begin to define and detail what you know you need. So audit, assess, address, and then activate, right? And so what do you want to do, and work backwards to create it. And I'm willing to give a blueprint that I use to create that dirty HR plan for myself to listeners. All they have to do is reach out.
Fantastic. That, I think that would be awesome. So yeah, if people are interested in that, then they can reach out to you, and I'll ask you at the end of the episode how they can best reach out. Now, would you have perhaps a piece of advice for HR practitioners or employers who would also, do their part in putting an end to social exclusion?
Times have changed so much for us, and you know I think that we have to just take accountability, individually and as organizations and companies. I think that we all realize that we can do better, and defining what our better is, at least that's what I did. And so if you want to create more inclusivity, more equity in your workplace, more diversity in your workplace, it starts with, realizing what you have to do to make that change. For us, it starts with having those conversations, because conversations always challenges what you believe. Internally, we created something called an inclusive, where we intentionally bring people together to have lunch to spark conversations, and we measure it through perspective points. Did you learn something new? Did you find something you had in common? Would you do it again? And what we've seen is that it's created relationships with people. It's changed what people thought about other individuals, and it's changed what we believe was possible internally as a workplace. So if you want to be better, you can't just say you want to be better. You have to actually put things in place to do better. And that just doesn't start with a cool giveaway, hiring one minority to be your diversity manager or your VP manager. It's going to start with your policies, your procedures, and everything that you do centered around that one end goal. And looking at yourself in the mirror and not just creating metrics for your team, but creating metrics for yourself and make sure that you're meeting them.
Khalilah, we are getting to an even more fun part of every episode. And so this is the part where, first of all, I am going to ask you what you believe is the biggest cliche that's out there about HR.
That HR is boring and always about compliance. I mean, because that's not me. That's why I didn't want to come into the industry, because HR is not boring. I'm loud. I like to have fun, but I also understand people. And I think that when people look at HR, they always look at us as the team that cracks the whip, but we're actually the team that cares. We are the team that are intentional about what we do, and we want to see individuals in the workplace thrive. And then there's this idea that HR, we're superheroes. I think we can be classified, but HR also needs a break. You know, sometimes we can't do it all ourselves. And so showing grace to you, that your HR professional, or showing grace to yourself as an HR professional, I think is important. So it's that idea. HR is compliant. They're boring. They're all about just the rules, and they're all about cracking whips. And I think HR today, the right HR today, people that are really focused and that want to do good in the workplace and provoke change, are about seeing employees thrive and succeed in areas that they've been hired for. You don't come into a workplace just to fill a space, but you come into the workplace to make a difference where you are and to be a part of the full process and the end goal of the company that you're working in.
Yeah, that was, I think, very beautifully put. I have another one for you, Khalilah. That is, I always ask every guest if they want to share an epic win and an epic fail with our audience. So you can start with either one.
Yeah, so my epic fail, I said all these good things about Disrupt You and these programs, but I didn't have it together. I failed so many times trying to come up with an idea for this workplace and for the people that we serve. I mean, I had meltdowns trying to come up with these ideas, and every time I took it to my CEO, he would shake his head. And I remember sitting in the office telling him that I don't think that I'm your person. I don't think that it's me, because this is all I have. And he was like, I think you are the person. I think you just have to go back and, and take your time and dig deeper. And it was a couple of weeks later that the Disrupt You that we know today, that 8-week curriculum, was fully designed, by my hand. And, I had to look at the framework that made sense for our population, but I didn't have it in the beginning. And I almost not only gave up, I almost walked away. And today I think back and realize that I'm happy that I kept going. So, I mean, those were big failures for me at that time in my life in 2018. And I would say an epic win was, I mean, goodness, I see, and this is going to sound awkward to you, but I never celebrate my wins. I always think that if my team wins, I win. And so I can't really highlight something that I've done, but I can celebrate what the team has done. And we've been here since 2017 active. We only had a product this year, and our beer recently went to market. And that's a win for us, a win for the young men that came in. That's a part of the original 11, and was telling the entire community that they were going to produce a beer, and to see the brew produced in the 65,000 square foot facility in the heart of the South Side, where people can look out their window and view this as a beacon of hope. That's the win.
Yeah, I could feel that one. I think that is definitely the win, Khalilah. Very, very beautiful. I think this
Thank
is
you.
also where I'm gonna give you a really, really, really big thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share the story of True Colors and to share the passion that I have for people in this industry. I'm sure you can hear it. I'm sure the people that are listening can hear it. And I can't see myself anywhere else. And a place that I ended up accidentally, I actually believe now that it's part of the assignment. And so, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was accidentally, to be honest, Khalilah. I think it had to go this way. And yeah, I could definitely hear it. I could also feel it, the passion. It's super, super inspiring. Maybe one last thing. So if people do want to connect with you or if they want to reach out, where can they best do so?
Yeah, so I am Khalilah Equips on all social sites, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and hey, you can email me also at ko@truecolors.co. Co.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video, please. Thank you, and see you soon for a new episode. Bye.